Okay, well, let's talk about some of those lifestyle management changes. Let's start with the most important one, which I think you and I would both argue would be the diet, the ketogenic diet. What was your experience? It sounds like you were gung ho and just really wanted to jump right in. What was your experience like? Was it terribly difficult? What challenges did you face? Practically speaking, was it weird to, buy new foods and try to prepare them? Like, what challenges did you yourself run into?
You're right. I did go gung ho. I jumped straight in. I did a lot of reading. I did a ton of reading, and I'd also back in the day worked as a cook and cooking in kitchens and things, and I've always cooked and baked. So I was very happy in the kitchen and around food and preparing food. So I had no problems with sort of recipes or coming up with food. So what I did was I went from a completely standard diet, coffee with 2 sugars a day, 4 coffees, there's 8 teaspoons of sugar there, all the sweet treats. I was completely carb addicted, completely food addicted. I've also resolved binge eating and food addiction with a ketogenic diet too, just as a way. But so I began and I went, okay, I'm going to eat less than 20 grams of carbs a day. So that's what I did from day one. If you're out there and you're listening, I would not recommend that as a strategy. Take, I would just go a low carb ketogenic meal. I'd just replace them one by one, maybe a keto breakfast for a week and then normal meals and then just ease into it slowly. And the reason I say that is, yes, I did have some problems with this. So what happened was I jumped into it like everybody. It's completely new. It's very strange. You sort of tinker around the edges. I was a bit in, a bit out, bit in, bit out, bit in for a little while. And then I went, no, I'm all in. And going into ketosis, when you first go into it, the adaptation phase, because there's a lot that happens as you change your body's system of energy into being a fat burner. There's a lot of changes that take place, and they sort of unwind over a couple of months, really. But heading into ketosis only takes a few days, but it can also affect your sleep to begin with. Most people have improved sleep on a ketogenic diet, but just to begin with, it can leave you sleepless for a little while, which may not be a problem for most people. But if you have a severe mental illness called bipolar 2 disorder, where a hypomanic episode can be triggered by lack of sleep. So say, for example, it would take me, if I had disrupted sleep for 2 or 3 days, I could go into hypomania, which is stepping onto an illness roller coaster that could take 3 months out of my life, right? So that's two
Wow.
days of lack of sleep. And once I was on that sort of roller coaster of hypomania, I knew where that was going to end. It was going to end in despair. 2 days of lack of sleep, right? So things like jet lag and stuff are a little bit different when you're managing bipolar 2 in your life. So if you're out there and you're thinking about doing this, you need some really good strategies in place for how you might deal with loss of sleep or anything that comes up. I totally believe that people can do this on their own, but easing into it would be a safer way of doing it. So I did that, and I got caught out. I had an episode whilst I was ill. I went off the diet, unfortunately. I missed my own 50th birthday because I was so unwell. That was a disappointment to me. And then when I was sort of coming out of the depression, I thought, I did feel better on that keto diet. And then I managed that adaptation phase better the second time round. Since then, I've been sort of continuously in keto. I started doing a bit of coaching because I sort of took it for granted, I guess, how much I knew about food because I'd already been interested. So I sort of knew how many carbs were in milk, and I knew milk had carbs, and I knew nuts were quite heavy on carbs, and I knew I didn't want to eat 17 blocks of cheese in a day and call it a ketogenic diet. And so I started coaching other people through food choices, and that was really interesting, listening to people talk about how they manage their diet, because you're quite right. did you start keto before you went carnivore?
Yeah, I did. It's such
Yeah.
a common thing. I'm sure you notice it with all of your coaching clients as well.
Yeah. So, it's interesting, isn't it? So my keto diet might have looked nothing like your keto diet.
That's right.
We could have both been doing ketogenic diets that were nothing alike each other. In fact, and so I was coaching, and then so that was sort of 2, 3 years. And then I was coaching someone who was having terrible problems with food intolerance. And I'd heard about the carnivore diet being the ultimate elimination diet. And I thought, well, how can I suggest a carnivore diet to this person if I haven't tried it myself? And the wonderful thing about a ketogenic diet was it removed from me, it gave me what you hear in this community called food freedom. I was no longer craving, I was no longer food addicted. So when I began the ketogenic diet, I was like, oh, can I give up toast? I don't know that. How could I live without toast? It was a real emotional tie. And all that vanished with keto. And one of the things I found through doing keto for 3 years was that food has now become something that I'm very relaxed around and very much sort of just happily in control of my own intake in a relaxed kind of way. And so if I choose to play with something or experiment with something because I want to play or experiment with something, I kind of can, and it's not a big deal. And if I want to try something, I can. It's not a big deal. It's up to me. There's no carnivore police out there. There's no keto police out there. They're not going to arrest me if I, you know, have a sweetener or I don't know, have some broccoli. Anyways, I had a client and with food intolerances, and I thought, well, I better put myself on the carnivore diet to see what it's like. And so I did, and I've never gone back. It's so easy, and I'm so lazy. But here's an interesting thing, because I was listening to Kerry Mann, who's got a show, Homestead How, and
Homestead
he's
House,
doing the Healing Humanity
Healing Humanity.
documentary.
Yeah.
And he said he'd been keto off and on, but it wasn't until he went carnivore that his mental health symptoms resolved for him, sort of crippling depression. Interestingly for me, when I went carnivore, and I was always in ketosis, always. I was never out of ketosis when I was on keto. I was completely committed to that. I simply do not eat what will give me bipolar 2. I'm not going to eat anything that's giving me bipolar 2. Forget that. But when I went carnivore, I didn't find any difference in my mental health. I didn't find an improvement in my mental health going carnivore. That stayed the same. Um, my joint pain improved. My body recomposition really took off, and it's very, very easy and delicious way to eat. So again, it's that sliding scale. So I know, for example, if I want to keep my clear mental health, I can eat as much broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, or whatever as I like, and that's not going to affect me. But listening to Kerry Mann's story, if I filled Kerry Mann up on broccoli, that is going to affect his mental health. And where people sit with this and what they choose to eat or not eat is such an individual thing. The similarity between the ketogenic diet and the carnivore diet in terms of metabolic psychiatry is that both those diets are ketogenic diets. You will be in ketosis on those diets. I find my ketone levels are actually possibly a little bit lower on a carnivore diet, but at the same time, as a menopausal woman, I think probably for the first time in my life, I'm actually getting a really good amount of protein. I'm not eating a high protein diet. I'm eating carnivore, but it's still a moderate protein diet. So I'm getting about probably 90 grams of protein a day, which isn't a huge amount, but I doubt that I was making 90 grams before, and I certainly feel uh, better for it, and my workouts and the weights that I can move and manage show it. Yeah.